In this video, I'm going to show you how to fix plasterboard. The first thing you want to do is select the right bit. This is a PZ2 or a POSI 2 bit. Although it will fit in your plasterboard screws, it's actually the wrong type of bit to use. This is a Phillips bit and it's actually the right type of bit. The reason is all your phosphate coated black plasterboard screws have a cross head, not a star head. So your Phillips bit will fit in there perfectly, whereas your POSI bit will always be a little bit loose. So you might as well start things on the right footing. Although a POSI 2 bit will work, a Phillips 2 bit is just that little bit better. Next, we're on to bit holders. So you need a bit holder in your drill that will actually hold the plasterboard screw. This is an old bit holder. It's still got a Phillips bit in the end, but as you can see, the screw drops out. You want to invest in a bit holder with a good magnet. If you're doing a lot of plasterboarding, you need the screw to stay in the end of your drill. You want to select the right screws. These are standard wood screws. We never use those for plasterboarding because if they rust, it'll show through your paintwork. You want to use some phosphate coated plasterboard screws. You always want to fix your plasterboard halfway on your timber stud wall. So we're going to use a combination square to mark it. Position your plasterboard halfway onto your stud. If this is the bottom of your stud wall, you always want to position your plasterboard slightly up from the ground so that no moisture transmits to the bottom of the plasterboard. This is what happens if you screw too close to the edge. Your first plasterboard screw wants to be 1.5 inches up from the bottom. You never want to screw too close to the edge of the plasterboard sheet if you can avoid it. Always have the factory edge on the join and the cut edge up to the wall. Always set your plasterboard screws flush with the top of the paper. Plasterboard screw isn't flush and it's pulled through the paper. Just put another plasterboard screw right next to it. If your plasterboard screw is too high, just sink your plasterboard screw in so it's flush with the paper or 0.5 millimeter below. You can always test your plasterboard screw flushness by running something over the top. If it doesn't catch, you know you're good. Plasterboard screws should be placed every 6 inches or 150 millimeters along the length of the stud. Plasterboard screws should be positioned 1/2 inch in from the edge. Spacing the plasterboard screws every 6 inches actually works into the sizes of plasterboard sheet. If you've not done much plasterboarding, set your drill speed to speed 1. This just gives you more control. These phosphate coated plasterboard screws won't rust when they come into contact with the filler or the plasterboard skim. It's best practice to tack both of your plasterboards into position before adding all the infilling screws. Position your screws opposite the screws on the previous plasterboard. Sometimes you might need to put your plasterboard screw at a slight angle just to hit the timber behind. Now that both plasterboards are tacked in place, we can add our screws every 6 inches. The reason we tack our plasterboards first with a minimal amount of screws is so that as we put the screws in here every 6 inches or 150 millimeters, as the plasterboard screw goes in, this edge is supported by the other plasterboard. If the plaster tries to pull out, it will hit the board next to it. So we always tack our boards into position and then add all the infilling screws once our wall or ceiling is complete. Always check that your plasterboard screws are flush or below the surface by running over them with a piece of wood. And that is how you properly fix some plasterboard to a stud wall. If you learned something from this video, drop us a like. If you want more fast, simple DIY tips, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.